9 was entering the bind. And so binding is, first of all, when you lock the swords. It's also done at close measure, so at the point of percussion, at roughly the shoulder, so that you can't back out and you're actually forced to lock blades. There were 3/4 ways to enter the bind. The first one was the striking the end of the bind, where you draw the person in, then pressure the sword to lock it. The second one is catch and slide, where you're catching and sliding down in. The fourth one was defending, so if you did a cut, and then a block, and then pressure back to hold that so you can't escape with your cut.
Yep.
And then the fourth one was still a block, but instead of trying to hold it tight, you strike in, and then I would surrender the blade and then fall over into like a barrier guard in order to kind of hold you in a low position where you can't come up because of my guard, and I have you down low to catch, grapple, move in. So that was the lesson on getting into the bind. This is the lesson of what to do once you've actually engaged in the bind, what to do next. The first one is the winning bind. So if we strike in, and then I push over and I have the top. The first thing you want to do is strike down the blade. So to do that, all you do is shift the angle and then slide down. And it will automatically feed straight to your head, okay? So if you strike in, you're winning, and then just twist the blade, but you want to twist the blade down, and you'll feel it slide. I'm going to push it a little bit further out, but we'll go ahead and engage that, right? And you feel that it will automatically go that way. The second thing to do, if you're winning the position, you have the overbind, which is what you're going for, is if you feel that you're leading into what I want you to do, you maybe don't want to commit to the bind because it will result into a double. So if that's the case, and you strike and you feel like I'm pushing forward, I'm ready to block, and maybe I'm going to reach for the hand and kind of drop into that drop position that I told you about. If you feel any of that where it's not tight and suddenly you're worried it's not going to go the way you want, you would discard my blade by pushing strong to weak and then just throwing my blade down, right? So with me acting it, if I strike in, I'm going to overbind, and then I feel like you're giving away, I push down that way and step back.
Okay.
That discard prevents you from being able to counter back or thrust or something along that lines. It gives me the room to step away. Reset and try it again without you doing it. So you strike again, and you feel that you get overbind, right, you still step away. Okay? That's winning. You pretty much always want to slide down or discard the blade, one of the two. Neutral's where it gets more interesting. And when I say always, exceptions to every rule, right? But with the neutral, we have 4 different actions. And one of them is a quote-unquote sword move. There's 2 for this one, okay? So the first one is the same thing in that if we're neutral and I slip down, right, I can still have a chance to hit you even if you pull back and try and push. That could go into like a shoulder hit. It wouldn't necessarily hit your head because you're going to push over and have a stronger defense because I'm surrendering some of the strength, but I might still get a hit in because you're pulling the blade up, and therefore there's a chance that I'm faster. That means, though, it's a race, okay? So whenever you're locked in this neutral position and you don't have the top, the first one who shoots down has a chance to hit. The second one, if you try and push down, I will already surrender too much of the blade, and you see that you're on my guard and you're over the shoulder. So you'll end up more likely to miss.
Very high risk, high reward kind of situation, though?
It favors whoever acts first. But in either case, there's no guarantee because you're feeding sort of with resistance that push. And as you see that it goes over this way, if I give up too much, then it falls off to the side, and then you end up inside the weapon. So to some degree, right, in the risk versus reward, in some ways, if you're fast enough and the other person doesn't think about it, you can just strike down the blade and hit them because they're concentrated on the pressure this way, and as soon as I twist, it's already there, right? Is there a risk of a double? Yes. But you should be aware that that is an action that people are likely to take because they could also confuse that for a winning bind, right? If I'm pushed over, I'm going to go that way to try and get that bind. And if I'm not pushed over, or that you're starting to win back because you raise a little higher, right? At that moment of transition, when I was here, and it starts to transition here, we're in neutral, I could still go for this as though I had that winning position. So you need to be wary of that and have a strong close body push up at that shoulder to try and possibly get away from it. Also stepping behind the sword. So, right. So if I'm striking neutral and this starts to slide down, you want to push with a hand, but rotate that back foot. Okay. If you do 2 feet, it's going to be too slow because the tempo is almost instant. So you push.
Or something like that.
That can work, but if I'm pushing this way and you try and pull that way up, it's going to be harder. Like if you try and step to this way, because I can still go over the guard, it's better if you push it this way and step behind, just swinging that back foot around. Tracking, right? Because that resets your whole body. Now that little bit of push is going to miss everything.
And then
Right.
I see that.
So the second one is one everybody loves. When you're locked in this neutral thing, your hands are forward, you're in this blade, we're kind of a 50-50, neither of us has the upper bind, like top position, right? A very common thing to do is to reach forward and grab the hand. Okay, now I immediately displace your sword, come behind, right? Mm-hmm. You may try and hit me with the faults of your blade, but I've got a pure hit on me. The one thing to remember about this is, once you've displaced that blade, you can't just let go, because now you're gonna false edge hit me. So, once I hit this, I then have to take the sword and bring it down here. So,
and then catch.
Right, so what you're trying to do, it makes sense. So I'm pushing, and then I hit, and then you bring this back, immediately catch the sword, and then flip it away. Right, now you don't have to worry about that sword coming back, because in the true timing of combat, when I hit that hand to knock it away, I'm going to knock momentum, I'm going to swing and hit this, and then you're going to come back. You might get that, but I just hit you in the head, and I'm coming down with the sword.
So I think you win on the points, you know?
If you're doing a points, yes, like the 4-1 thing, you get a one leg shot with that.
Yep.
But also, too, you're able to calmly aim for the legs as a rebuttal because we're standing here in false time. In a true time where you're pushing the hands displaced, you're likely to try and push back up this way, and then I'm coming down to block. I'm also trying to step back with that, which means you're going with a false edge with a short reach, and I'm going with a true edge with a longer reach. Is it a guarantee? Never. But is it more likely that you're going to win that exchange? Yes. So if I'm pushing, and then we're even match, you reach over with grab the hand, push down, and then remember to catch the blade with that follow-up.
I've seen you go for that as well.
Right. So this, and then you go this.
This tag, and then you're trying to catch that as well.
Right. And then so you want to.
I feel like one thing in that situation that just left it is you didn't keep pushing my hand out or pulling because you have so much leverage on my body in that situation.
Right. So
I'm pretty sure that has to do with the lesson as well.
So when I do it, I push and grab like this.
Yeah.
Right.
And then there's like.
I'm straightening my elbow on your arm. That way you can't straighten your arm out.
Yep.
I do it instinctively, but the important thing is the grab. So grab, catch, right, and then you've got that elbow to set back at. Now, remember, catch the sword.
Okay. So it was like you would strike and then come up.
Right. So
that would be the only situation.
So still hold. So you strike in. Well, you're probably going to want to actually come over and then push down with a blade, and then you can separate yourself back. Because if I try and come back up, I'm going to hit you with a false. It's going to be short. If I come this way, it takes more time because I have to unwrap my arm. Yeah. Either way, you have more of a chance to escape. So you'll catch the sword, cut, block down, and then escape out. All right. The next one is an actual move called mutarin.
Mutarin.
All right, it means the mutating strike. So you're in a neutral bind, you're locked here. All right, so what you're going to do is you're going to basically get your opponent to hit themselves with your sword. How you're going to do that is rotating the pommel into a fault strike. Now, we're pressurized in this. So when I rotate your sword comes across and drives it over.
Because it was like I was pressing it, yeah, so that's
right, so not full force, but yes. So push and then rotate.
And then this is real quick.
Right, and then I push it across myself. So a lot of people like the mutarin. Practice it, get good with it, it's pretty fun. I have succeeded with it quite a few times.
I was going to say that seems extraordinarily strong, and the fact that you only need to catch that one time and then go straight into it.
And you're just rotating that pommel over, basically, is the easiest way to do it.
That's almost like how William will sit in the side sword. He'll wait for that one strike so he can do his goofy or false edge every single, it doesn't matter what you're doing, false edge, as much as you can.
Okay. All right, so that was 3. So the first one was strike down the blade. You're racing. 2 was the strike and then catch the hand. Yeah.
The third is.
And the third is mutarin. So we'll have you repeat those 3. So strike down the blade before I can get out of the way. Strike down, grab the hand, catch the sword. Yep. And then 3 is strike mutarin, and then I hit myself. It also should catch on your guard this way after the hit, so you don't have to worry about the reprisal right away. You do want to try and escape back out of that cut, okay? The fourth one, we're not going to go over all of this in this lesson because it enters basically all the grappling techniques. Whenever you strike and lock, if you had a winning, you just go for the hit. If you have a losing, you're not in a position to want to try and grapple unless you're really good at grappling. And in a neutral bind where we're pressuring against each other, the hand was one form of grapple, but a lot of the other grapple moves will be executed from there where you're binding engaged on each other. And then you're going to push in on this, getting in close enough that you can engage with the body, with the legs, with the arms, so forth. Okay?
I remember you explaining to me how you had to actually learn swordsmanship before I could do any of the grappling. Otherwise, it's just, I don't have the foundation at all. It's just grappling. I just ignore everything else and go straight to the grappling.
Right. But also, you see what I'm saying about if I have a winning bind, now I'm just going to hit you with the sword. So you wouldn't want to try and grapple not knowing when you're going to get hit.
Yeah.
If you're losing, better to block with a sword and keep the distance. Okay. All right. So that's neutral bind. The next one is the losing bind. So if you're pushing over here and now you have the over, the first one is to surrender the blade.
Yep.
We already talked about this sort of in reverse of why you would throw the sword away. So the very typical is you push, I feel like I'm losing, I lock you down, now I can push this way. Now this opens up engaging the physical, but also too, let's say you try and come back over, I can actually play strong on the weak and then bring the sword back over this way. This allows me to do like a false edge and then cut in the body, or whether it's, if we do it at a lower position, you push over and then I catch this way and bring this back at you.
I feel like there's a chance of mutarin happening there, or like your own strike mutarin, you know how that. I feel like in that motion, you could get caught with your own blade if they just thrust while you're pulling it over. But that's just But I'm just saying that's just one little thing.
In theory, could it happen? Yes. In practice, in 6 years, 7 years of doing this, give or take, I've never had that happen at that moment. What happens is that you're pushing the sword down, I surrender, and now you realize you're locked out. Your most likely response is to come back up, and I'm going to drop strong on weak and control this over and pull back.
It's the control right there that you can see.
So There are options there, like there's always a chance you could thrust, but if you get that thrust in the middle earlier and you're pushing, it's easier to pull off in slow time, but the other thing is, we'll lock into that for a second. You can get this thrust, but you're not protecting yourself when you're exposing this, so I can counter thrust back in on it.
Well, it wasn't just like the thrust, is because you were pulling it over. I felt like in that motion, if they timed it right, they could, while they were caught,
Right. What I'm saying, though,
that entire thing, and because your mind is so, I'm bringing it over, you wouldn't hit. Well, I mean, most people wouldn't have that locked up in their mind. Well, that's the next move.
That's the point that I'm talking about here. Because if I'm stepping back, I'm already controlling your weapon, and you're trying to thrust at a disadvantage. So if I bring this over, sure, you'll be able to fault this way, but I'm bringing this over. You're responding in this out of time. You can respond to that quick and put that pressure there in a way you can't in that moment that we just flip it and go. So in slow motion theory, you're like, yeah, I can pull this off. In an actual combat of where you're striking,
I mean, it all comes down to the training.
You win because you're pushing. I surrender. I push back.
I'm sorry.
And then, but see, my point though is your sword ends up here. That's going to result into a double or an off-tempo hit at best, assuming that it works in that actual way. If I catch it right, you push over, and then when I push back, I catch the strong on the weak, and then I have the exposed back. It's better to back out of that because you're choosing a double or letting me win, right? So you could fling and get that back, but there's no position in that where you're going to end up with a strong win unless you just get lucky, because you're opening yourself up after that fling. You track what I'm saying?
Yes.
So it would be better if you push it over, you can see me catch this and get ready for this position, and you're like, well, I can thrust, that's opening up. If instead you realize my weapon is short to my body and just step back.
Well, that was the only other option, was to.
Right. So at that place, you're clear. And that's going to work every time because I'm fighting here and trying to go back on this way. If you stand your ground, you're going to be in measure. And if you move forward, you're going to get a reprisal. So I'm not saying you're wrong in that you could get that hit. I'm just saying the likelihood of you getting a double is very high.
Okay.
Okay, so the next one is duplering, which is also a reason why you don't want to make that assumption. So this is similar to the last one. So you're winning this position, right? I surrender, and instead of trying to force this back over this way, I actually do this. And so duplering is the doubling strike. The thing is, you're pushing the sword over, and then I strike to knock the blade down and then hit you at far reach. The most likely reaction is that you try and come with a false edge strike back, but you're going to be losing measure with an understrike while I'm doing it far reach with him. That's why I make sure there's a long lane to it. So we'll have you execute both of these two. So the first one is I strike and win over, right? And then you...
Oh, I tried to catch it.
It would help if we're using swords the same side, but right. So strike over, and then and then try and control back. And then for duplering, we're gonna strike, and then you're gonna strike down.
Oh, I tried to. That's really weird. I'm not gonna lie. Once you surrender to this point, and you come to the
strike
edge,
down.
Strike down.
Well, it should be a circle.
Okay.
So,
I mean.
So I push over. I'm gonna feed your weapon. So you're gonna let the pressure, because I'm gonna win this, right? Because it's a winning position, or I'm gonna have a winning position. So you're gonna let me feed this weapon. I want to turn this so I don't tear the tape so much. As this comes over, you're surrendering the blade, letting me provide the energy, but it's going back this way. So you're gonna deliberately let me throw the sword, so to speak. All right. So I catch, I win, and then throw.
Okay.
All right. So you feel the pressure back.
Well, I was like doing
Right.
striking and then spinning into it is really weird.
Right. So you're doing it, but you're going to hit the sword, and then you're going to reach for this last one.
Okay.
Because the concern is that I push over, you feed, and then strike, and then if you go for that strike hit, I'm going to try and go for a double. So you want to high hit with it, okay?
It's like weird to do that.
All right, well, let me demonstrate one more time. So you're going to push on me, right? Right? And then it should be a, right? So.
I'm sorry, a little bit clumsy with this.
Part of the problem is my sword is too short. Let's get two swords the same length. All right. All right. So we're locking swords. You surrender.
Oh.
I thought that would help.
But I feel like
You're having trouble with the feed, right? So when you push on mine, and then I surrender, right? I'm going back towards like a barrier, and then like this, right? So I'm pulling the sword this way. Okay? So I push on yours. There. That was right.
Well, it's like the entire motion just feels weird to me. I don't think I'll practice it enough to get to that point.
Everything where it feels weird to you, you're used to it. Right. So, but the whole thing is that you're striking the sword to knock it down as far as possible, and then you continue that loop into that strike. So you should have a more natural movement into the action verse when my strike goes over. And then I'm trying to come back up. I'm just going to do kind of a weaker fault edge strike at your stomach probably. So with the lean, you should get a head strike in, or at least like a shoulder arm because I'm presented out there. So, but that's an actual depicted move. And
what was that called?
It's called Duplaren, the doubling strike.
Duplaren? Doubling strike.
So Duplaren is doubling. So at least that's what I understand it is. I'm being translated from another language. But the idea is that you're striking twice in the same place, hitting the blade and then hitting at the head. Okay? So the last thing for a losing position is simply retreat. So you strike in, and then as you're pushing in with this, I'm just going to try and step back out of it, because as soon as I surrender into sort of a barrier, you can't really get that cut in, and then I can re-engage again and try and get a better position. There's several ways to do the retreat. So the first one is like the jump back. So I struck in. If I charge my front leg as you do it, I can just push out. So
you barrier until you move.
Right, but you're jumping off your front leg. So you strike in, and then I win the position, and then you push off that leg. You're pushing off the back leg there. You're stepping forward with this leg, right? When you bend your knee, you're pressurizing it. So put your weight onto that leg, and then you kind of hop back, right? Yeah. You can just move this.
Stuck in that position.
All right, so strike in. And then that gets you distance clear. And that's one way. Another way is to actually step to try and close with the weapon. So if you strike in and then you're pushing over, right, I can actually step forward with a full leg step. And now I'm kind of in behind you.
Yeah.
This is also an entry for a lot of grappling moves. Like I said, not as common, but in a position where you want to grapple, you step in this way, limit your weapons. I'm defended, and then now I can start hitting and pushing, grabbing this weapon, so forth, right? The other way is to pressure.
Yep.
Well, we'll execute that one so you can try it first. Okay. So I strike in, and then I win, and then you move in this way.
And it's like, now that I'm like right here, there's all the stuff. There's like start pressing and stuff.
Right. And we have a grappling section. We'll go over that. But then there's also to the other side. So strike, you win that position, push it over, and then I can actually crossing step in to this side.
Okay.
And then kind of pressure on this arm here. Again, I'm kind of locking in the weapon here. If I do it right, sometimes you can even catch the guard on this position here and kind of push this down. Then you're ending into another thing similar like we did before, where you're like, well, maybe I try and come back up with this. If I get strong on weak, I can now actually be on this. You see what I'm saying?
That turns into a little bit of a dance in that situation.
Right. It's kind of a way to re-engage that swords. Moving to this side tends to make it a little bit better for grappling because the swords aren't in the way. I'm clearing the sword as you strike over to move onto your body, giving me access. If I'm deliberately, so you push this one and then I'm pushing this, I'm locking the swords between us. I'm not saying I can't grapple, like I could grab like here at the hilts or at the hands, but this is more likely a barrier from grappling. So if you wanted to try and grapple me, for example, you're going to loosen this grip, and then I'm going to gain control of the weapon, and now we can separate back out. Try again?
Yeah.
So in that way, it's going to be harder to grapple from this position. So there's the retreating out, the sidestepping into the weaks, or no, excuse me, well, to the strong side, away from the weapon, to lock off your weapon.
And then the same version.
And then there's a stepping into the weapon to hold and lock your weapon into place to make it still a sword fight, so to speak. Okay. All right, so there's a drill for this, and it's more of with your sparring. So instead of your normal, typical sparring, you actually start feeling the blade. Now, you saw me before do the circle where we do the shift. So one, you can do where you push towards me with the sword, and then I move over, right? And then, so now I can control this weak. So you're gonna pull back to try and control, then I push forward, and then you're gonna push over this, and then I push this way, and then we kind of end up with this triangle where we can't quite hit each other, right, with those positions, right? That's one thing to do, partly just to get the feel for the blade when you're in the winning and when you're in the losing position. The other thing is, usually binding is the metal part of the blade, right? We covered that some in the last one. Because if you're too far away, you're providing the weak, so they're going to control your weapon. If you're close in with the strong, now you're really more grappling, and because you're binding strong to strong here, it's full physical force. It's not so much being able to manipulate the weapons to kind of lock into place. Not only that, you end up with like the elbow grab push scenario. So binding with the sword tends to happen middle of the blade-ish, right? So the sort of practice for this is when you get ready to duel, start and then do a 3, 2, 1, go from that position, and then you're starting engaged in there because it's hard to
go from absolute complete neutral where no one's even touching to center the blade without accidentally one of you winning.
Well, so there's that, and then also the issue of most swordsmanship happens at reach where you're fighting for that snipe hits, right? So because you're doing the snipe hit control, manipulating at the end, every time you'll try and move in to try and bind, like if we're a little bit further out, and then I try and do this, you're going to try and move in and block out of that. There was a bind there, but then as soon as I was trying to come over here, you step back and try and stay out of it.
Yep.
To get someone to engage, you start in the bind, and then you have to feel that, and like, am I winning this position? Am I losing this position? Right? And then if you're going all the way up, well, then...
I felt like that's just weird. If you turn here and then drop it down as hard as you can, I imagine you could do something with that, or that might even be... It's basically just the same concept as you were showing me with the
there's a tendency of this, right? But once you go all the way up, I can hit at the legs too. So if you're getting too high with your guard, you're exposing everything else. So you have this sort of counterbalance of, do you want to draw up to try and control me, and then risk that leg cut or whatever. Now, if you do jack chains and no leg hits, you don't have to worry about that. If you're doing leg hits, and like, for example, I looked at the SoCal tournament rules recently. They do like a 1 point for arms and legs. So
Is it 2 for the
it's
center?
3 for chest, and then the collarbone and head is 4.
Okay.
So the thing with that is, it's only going to be a 1 point for the leg shot, but it is going to count. The score is to 7. So at least that's what it was when I looked at it recently, if I read it right. At any rate, that's basically the class. You can choose to do jack chains, not do jack chains. Learning to go through those, like when are you in the winning position? If you're in a position where you're losing, and then I can strike that over. If you're winning that position, you can strike down the blade, right? In the case that I had that winning position over here like this, you can go up, but that surrender is probably better than holding it, because like I do with this, when you try to hold it up top,
Yep.
then that opens up these leg shot thing. They're going to hit your leg, and I'm going to back out. Okay. Instead, you're going into where you submit into barrier, and now we can get into
Grappling.
more grappling, or even that you can do the thing where you try and reposition and grab strong on weak by stepping back and controlling the weapon. All right, was that all clear as mud?
I believe so.
Clear as mud, got it.
Pretty clear. Doubling strike. The ones that I really want to pay attention to are the doubling strike and the.
Mutating strike.
I was gonna call it. I was just gonna say mutant ninja turtle.
Yeah, so Mutating, of course, is the one where I'm
like you go
winning,
from here,
and then you're right.
and then you would pull.
And then also, the other one's really good too is the neutral bind, and then into the hand catch. Okay, so I specifically take that one away from the other grappling, but I wanted to cover it. So, all right, but that's it.
Okay. Thank you kindly.
You're welcome.